At UMC, access to your health care is only a call away. Dial 74-NURSE for free, instant medical advice from experienced and trusted UMC nurses. 24 hours a day. Learn more at umchealthsystem.com.
And welcome in everyone to RedRaiders.com. I'm Zach along with Don Williams, and this is his show, Don versus Twitter, where every week he takes a gander at your blue-birded questions and does his best to answer them with all his infinite Texas Tech football knowledge. Don, it's an off week, but the Twitter followers didn't have an off week. They sent you a lot of good material here.
That's right. We have about as good a Don versus Twitter segment as we have on a game week. So I guess we can get cracking.
And thank you all for sending these questions in. Don, we'll get started with a spread offense-oriented question here via Stephen May. Says, AJ Don Williams, why does the offensive line use narrow splits versus extra wide splits? In reference, of course, to the Leach-era spread offense.
Yeah, I think it's simply just a philosophy difference with what Cliff Kingsbury has done in the past and also with what your offensive line coach Lee Hayes has done in the past. I think they're just more comfortable with the narrow splits compared to the really large splits that you saw, of course, in the Mike Leach era, which, and I think that's probably the case among the Mike Leach disciples, so to speak, or the coaches on the Mike Leach coaching tree. I'm not sure any of those guys have offensive line splits that are as wide as Mike prefers.
They've hybrided into their own forms of offense, of course. Don, next one up here comes from Kelly Utterback. AJ Don Williams, why do you think Eric Ward didn't get thrown to until Webb came into the game? Do you think he was told to involve him more?
Davis Webb might have been, Cliff Kingsbury might have told Davis Webb to throw some more, give Eric Ward some more looks. Cliff has said after the last couple of games that he has taken it upon himself, that he feels like he's kind of blamed himself for Eric Ward not being targeted as much as he was in that first game. And although to some extent I think Baker Mayfield is simply comfortable throwing the ball to Jason Morrow, and then the other thing that you have coming into play there is Bradley Marquez has really emerged too. In Morrow and Marquez, you have two guys who are juniors, both of whom have a lot of talent. Now that they've been in the program for a couple of years, their talent's kind of taken over, and they're really starting to perform. So now the quarterbacks have some more viable options that more so than Marcus and Amaro were in the past. So, and again, I think Baker Mayfield is simply comfortable looking for Jason Morrow, particularly when he's under pressure, and with Marquez on the other side able to run those deep vertical routes. Maybe that's a throw that Baker Mayfield likes to make versus Eric Ward, who tends to thrive more on the curls and slants and that sort of thing. So, but it was interesting. I went back and charted, and in the TCU game, that one half of the Stephen F. Austin game, and the Texas State game when Baker Mayfield was in there, by my count, he targeted Jason Morrow 33 times and Eric Ward 7 times. So that's a discrepancy that I think will work itself out. Now, again, when Davis Webb was in the game, he targeted Eric Ward 10 times. Maybe it's a case where Davis Webb sees the field a little better also because he has quite a bit more height than Baker Mayfield. I think it'll kind of work itself out though as we go along.
And you can't really blame Baker Mayfield for targeting a kid like Jason Morrow. That is a huge target going across the middle of the field.
He's a security blanket, and obviously he's a guy who can. He's like you said, a huge target, and then he can do something. He has enough speed to do something with the ball after he catches it.
Don, let's stay on this subject of quarterbacks here. Barry Partain has for you. Is it likely that Brewer would be ready for KU? The freshman QBs have held their own, but likely wouldn't against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State.
I tell you, I would not be surprised if Michael Brewer is suited up in uniform against Kansas. I think I would be surprised if you see him playing much, if any at all. I think Cliff Kingsbury would very much like to get through another week, another game without having to use Michael Brewer. And I asked him a couple of weeks ago, I said, once Michael is cleared to practice, then how much longer is it after that you think he will need until he's ready to play in a game? And Cliff said he thought it would be an extended period of time. You know, he's got a lot of rust to knock off.
Right.
And he said that the thing is with the offense, with the pace that they go at and the demands that they make on the quarterback, it's not easy just to jump into that and pick it right back up when you haven't been doing it for, in Michael's case, a month and a half, almost 2 months now. So I think Cliff Kingsbury is very much hoping that either Baker Mayfield or Davis Webb can get off to a good start at KU, and they can keep Michael Brewer on the sideline if he's even cleared to actually play in a game by this time next week.
Don, let's go to a trio of questions here from Jeremy Dayhow, a person who's been quite involved in all your segments thus far. And the first one he's got for you, Don, is can we expect to see Alfredo Morales back in action after the bye week?
Cliff Kingsbury said this week that Alfredo Morales' injury is not as bad as it first appeared. You know, on Saturday night, of course, they put that air cast around his ankle. It looked like it was bad. It looked like something maybe season-ending. He says it's not as bad as it first appeared. With that said, though, you're talking a guy who's 320 pounds, and when you get one of the wheels injured, then it's going to, you know, it takes those guys some time to get healthy. Just like we've seen with Bo Carpenter, who went out the second half of that SMU game, and you know, you haven't seen him back in the game since. So I wouldn't expect to see Alfredo Morales back against Kansas. I think you would probably have some of those other young guys like a Balen Brown who went in to replace him the other night, maybe a Trey Keenan, help him fill out that offensive line next week.
And hopefully a game you get away with doing that against a Kansas team that has shown some signs of life lately, but they have struggled immensely still with some of the things that have plagued them the last few years. Don Jeremy continues here with both Mayfield and Webb look shaky in the pocket. Is there any chance Cliff Kingsbury runs the ball more versus Kansas?
I guess in a word, no. And I mean, here's the thing. The reason why is simply they have to be able to run the ball effectively,
and they haven't really done it yet.
And we just haven't. You just haven't seen that yet. Even the other night they got 118 yards, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And Cliff Kingsbury, a media person asked Cliff after the game. He said, you know, that's a little bit of improvement. Were you more pleased with the running game? And Cliff said, no, not at all. Said there were times when he said there were too many times where he had numbers in the running game, and you had the advantages, more blockers than they had lined up in the box, and still didn't get the yards. And Cliff's not really blaming the running backs because, you know, Kenny Williams and DeAndre Washington have kind of shown what they can accomplish in the past. I think he's really putting it on the offensive line, which you kind of do would be a weakness. And you know, Cliff Kingsbury has said very clearly more than once. He said, "I'm not going to bang my head against the wall if something's not working. Something's not working. We're not going to, you know, try it 50 times.
You're not going to cost yourself a game being stubborn because something won't work the way you want it.
With that said, I think Cliff would be more than happy if if the line could open some holes, and you could get Kenny Williams and DeAndre Washington going. They do need that, I think.
Absolutely.
Especially as the schedule gets tougher.
Don, last one here from Jeremy is a good one. Going into this bye week, what do you think both young quarterbacks need to work on the most?
I think, you know, ball security and simply good judgment. I think in the case of both, you've seen Baker Mayfield. Whenever he's indecisive about whether he has a man open or not, you know, I think he's getting quick to tuck the ball and run because he is quick enough and tough enough to go get 5 yards a lot of times, 5 yards, maybe 10 yards when he needs it. I think Cliff would like to see him sit in the pocket for another beat or two and wait for a third or fourth receiver to come open late. And then Davis Webb is guilty of a lot of the same thing. I mean, you see him; he's a guy who's, you know, he's not a great runner, but he's pretty mobile for a guy who's 6'4" and 200 pounds. And that's another thing that Cliff wants to see him do is, you know, stay in the pocket. He looked particularly bad on that, you know, that interception where he threw up the sideline where he was drifting to his right. And
they read it the whole way.
I'm not even sure either one of his feet was on the ground when he threw that ball. And you know, he's shown a propensity to really throw some balls up for grabs. So I think, like I say, sitting in the pocket and showing some better judgment, because you can get away with 3 interceptions when you're playing Texas State and Stephen F. Austin and teams like that. You're not going to get away with three picks when you're playing in the Big 12.
And also maybe for their health, they might stay a little healthier
That too.
if they stay in the pocket. You saw Mayfield get whacked on a run, and that's something I think they're concerned about, is those two getting hurt when they get outside the pocket. Don, last question here to end the show from Drew Conley. He says, at AJ Don Williams, after the first two games, everybody was all in on Baker Mayfield. Now we can't wait for Michael Brewer's return. What could Brewer bring to the table?
Well, I think we kind of go back to what we just discussed
Right.
there. I think with Michael, you're talking about a guy who played in half a dozen games last year, has gotten some exposure to Big 12 conference football. You feel like that he will sit in the pocket longer, not make some of the same up for grabs, bad judgment throws that we've seen the two freshmen make. And also I think maybe Michael, since he has been in the program for 3 years now, maybe a little bit more on the same page with some of these guys, with some of the receivers. Maybe if Michael Brewer comes back, you get Eric Ward more involved.
Right.
Again.
And quite frankly, Don, a few weeks ago, I think we were saying if Baker Mayfield keeps playing this way, it's going to be hard for anyone to unseat him. But now,
He didn't keep playing that way.
A couple weeks removed from that, and everyone's saying it would not be extremely difficult for Michael Brewer to come in and take his job back at this point if he plays like he did the times we saw him last year, like against Oklahoma State, and in the bowl game comes in and chucks a touchdown pass in his only appearance.
Yeah. I mean, I think both of the freshman quarterbacks have really bright futures.
Absolutely.
I mean, tremendous arms on both of those kids. Tremendous. I love the toughness and the competitiveness that Baker Mayfield shows, and you can see Davis Webb when he has another year or two in a college weight room and he's 6'4" and 220 pounds. That guy's going to have a real command of the field. But yeah, right now, the last couple of weeks, you've seen that they look like 18-year-old true freshmen.
So the Red Raiders, of course, will enjoy the rest of their off week getting ready for Kansas, and we will try to enjoy a little bit of an off week as well. We're going to take a little break, step aside for the next couple days, but we'll be right back at you full action on Monday from the press conference as we preview the Red Raiders' trip to Lawrence, Kansas to take on the aforementioned Jayhawks. Don, I know you always love that trip to one of your favorite places on earth, Lawrence, Kansas.
Going to drive up there to Lawrence.
We're so not going to enjoy that.
We will be up there on Friday night when they do
late night at the Fog.
Yeah, first basketball practice.
Which means
we'll see if anybody even shows up.
Which means there will be no one at that football game at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. We'll have plenty of coverage of that game and the preview for it coming up at RedRaiders.com and LubbockOnline.com. But for now, that's going to do it for this episode of Don versus Twitter. For Don Williams, I'm Zach Long. We'll see you next week.